Have you ever wondered how many closing attempts is actually too many closing attempts in a sales call that you're having? Well, in this video, we're going to dive into some of the data and I'm going to reveal the best answer. Stay tuned. Good morning, FlowChat Connector. What's happening? Back at you here with another high ticket tune-up, some FlowChat sales training. I'm excited to be here today with you. And today we are diving into one of the most profound, prolific, most coveted, talked about things in sales, closing deals. So we want to talk about some closing deals, like how many closing attempts should we make in a sales conversation, presentation, whatever have you. We got a great question actually came from our buddy Gabe here. And Gabe asks this. He said, Sean, I've read a lot about closing techniques. Can you share which ones are the best and what are best practices when it actually comes to closing deals? First and foremost, know that today is Thursday. Thursday, statistically, factually proven, is the best day of the week to close deals, followed very closely by Tuesday and then by Wednesday. So Thursday's the best, Tuesday's the second best, Wednesday is the next best day to actually do your closing business. So if you are taking sales calls, you may want to think about how you're putting that into your calendar. But what I wanted to dive into is some of the math, some of the numbers, the data, the research that I've done, and just the personal experiences that I've had to actually make this happen. So to understand a little bit about this, if you go out to any book library or any place about sales, you pick up a book, there's almost always guaranteed going to be a chapter on closing. And in fact, part of my sales journey, when I was on it, I remember going to the library specifically and opening books looking for closing techniques because I wanted to learn all the closes so that I could put them into play. And I learned, I don't even know how many, I just went through all of them. And when I started looking at the data, I found some really, really interesting things. The most important thing to note is that there's a direct correlation with the amount of close attempts and the sales price or the investment amount, right? And so let's dive into some slides here. And I just want to kind of go through some of these numbers and talk it through with you. So let's look at the current reality, right? And so first and foremost, most sales trainers say closing techniques are the most important thing to learn, because if you learn the closing techniques and you go into the sale, and remember, you've heard this ABC, always be closing. Unfortunately, it doesn't yield the best results, right? And so I always used to think this until I was proved wrong by statistical data and facts, because I'm a data-driven sales pro and marketer. So the second thing to remember here is data shows that sales trainers suggested trying 5 closes per sale would bring the best results. And as like all the biggest, people known as the father of closing and some of these really, really big named sales trainers that I've been researching and learning about, they all say the more often that you can attempt to close a deal, the more closes that are typically going to happen. Now, I put that to the test, and here was really, after reviewing all the data, this is a very simple chart that I can share with you to show you the facts, okay? So as we look at this thing here, we could see that the success rate, or the percentage of calls leading to a sale when sales professionals, so this was 190 sales calls that we reviewed, and we looked through the data, and of those 190 sales calls, we had about half of those people attempt 5+ sales closes in a conversation, and the other half, we had them attempt, between less than 5. And we looked at all the numbers, and here was the results. When sales pros were trying to close deals and they used more than 5 closing techniques, the response was lower. It was more pressure for the prospect. And there was some yeses, definitely some yeses, but then there was way, way, way more no's. And there was basically the relationship or the rapport was severed because the salesperson was too pressureful or too pushy during that sales call. And then we looked at this other group that was actually trying sometimes they tried 0 closes and still closed deals. Then they closed 1 and 2 tries. And they actually, when you do 2 types of close attempts in a sales conversation, look at the success. You're almost doubling your output. And so if you're in the game to close deals, one of the things that we have to think about, it's not the closing that's the most important. What becomes the most important is the kind of the beginning middle part of the conversation, right? And again, yesterday or the last time I did a video, we talked about the different types of questions that you can ask and where you should ask them in the sales conversation. And the biggest and most important one is the kind of the second bucket, which is diving into the problem type questions where you're understanding what problem they have. Because if you can't find the problem that you solve with the prospect in a conversation, and that doesn't even include any closing questions, it's not a good fit. So what I always teach in our world is you got to identify, again, a sales call should have some flow to it. The first couple of minutes, a little, break bread, make friends, whatever, set an agenda, and then dive into these types of questions, finding the problem that you solve. When you find that, guess what? You're going to solve the problem. So here's the best solution. So the best solution is a combination of all this data and the research and everything that I looked at versus what works for us, what works for agencies, what works for the people in the space. And again, now I've trained 10,000, probably close to 10,000 different students. So I've reviewed a lot of sales calls. Here's the best solution. An average of 2 close attempts per sales call will yield the best results in the majority of cases. I need to preface this with a caveat because there's 2 different types of closes that you should specifically focus on in a conversation. The first close should actually come somewhere in the middle of the sales conversation. It should not come right at the end or somewhere out there. It should come at the middle of the sales conversation. And this one, as we all know, people buy emotionally and justify logically. Let me say that again. People buy emotionally and justify logically. So if we know that as statistics from the psychology side of the field, then the 2 close attempts that we need to use, all you need to do is get an emotional close and then a logical close. And in a sales conversation, what it sounds like is after you've discovered the problem that someone has, before you've gone any further than that, you make the decision. Do you want to work with this person or not? If you answer yes, then the conversation needs to go down the path of, hey, Joe, like, I understand that you have this problem. I solve this for all of my other clients. And here's the thing that really is important to me. I love your energy and I want to work with you. The only question I have right now is, am I someone that you want to work with to solve this problem? And when they say yes, did you see that? It wasn't anything to do with the sale or getting started. It was person to person agreeing that we wanted to work together. This will build so much rapport in your sales conversation, and it's only the first close attempt that you've made. So when you make that close in the emotional side and they say, yes, I would love to work with you, then the rest of the conversation in your sales call goes very simple. It says, okay, well, let's just figure out what all the other data is, the logical part of this stuff. Like, let's see that, let me talk about budget here. Let me talk about how you make decisions. Let's go through that process real quick. And at the end, we both already want to work together. We can just figure out what the numbers look like and go forward. Does that sound okay? Yes, that sounds great. There is my second close. So my closes in a lot of my sales calls actually happen somewhere in the middle. And then I do a logical. So I do an emotional close first. Hey, do you want to work with me? Because I want to work with you. That one works very well, probably in about 95% of all cases of sales calls I've ever been on. And then the second part is, well, let's just figure out the details and we'll go forward. Perfect. That's the second logical close. So my closes typically happen kind of in the middle of my sales conversations. And then we get to the end, it's rather just what's the next step? Like, that's all it is. So there's no pressure at all ever when I sell. And that's why I've had some pretty big success. So if you're not selling in that flow, just think through this, right? If you're trying a whole bunch of close attempts, you want to back it down. Right? Just try 2. Whatever use those as 2 types of closes. You will close more deals if you try to close less often during a sales call. And with that said, you've just been tuned up. And I think it's important that everyone understands this and knows this and loves this, because when you get this right, game over. You're going to win every time. So with that said, you've just been tuned up. I can't wait to see you next time. Make sure and smash that like button. Share this out to people that need it. Feed the algorithm gods. And boom shakalaka. We will see you next time.